You're listening to The Decision Advantage, a RANE Network podcast. RANE is a risk intelligence firm dedicated to providing companies with strategic analysis to power informed critical decision-making. As the global risk landscape becomes increasingly complex, our forward-looking perspective provides the roadmap for organizations to navigate uncertainty, respond to emerging threats, and uncover opportunities. Learn more about how RANE can help your organization at ranenetwork.com.
Hello and welcome to The Decision Advantage, a risk intelligence and analysis podcast from RANE Network. In this episode, RANE founder David Lawrence is joined by clinical psychologist and founder of Wholeview Wellness, Dr. Sarah Church. With more than 20 years of experience treating addiction and co-occurring mental health disorders, Dr. Church is a nationally recognized expert in evidence-based addiction therapies. Together, they explore the realities of substance and gambling addiction and the social and psychological triggers that surround us every day. We hope you enjoy the conversation.
Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today for what I know is going to be a very meaningful conversation, particularly with the Super Bowl this coming Sunday and March Madness upon us in about a month. And just to forewarn our audience, no, Sarah will not be giving us the picks or the odds or handicapping any of those athletic contests, just the opposite. But we're here to talk about a very, very important aspect of social life and risk, namely, the issues around gambling and the addictions that are occurring as a result of the proliferation of gambling apps and sports betting in general, but also the prediction platforms. So Sarah, thank you again for taking some time with us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Okay. Why don't I begin just a quick introduction, Sarah, just to have you talk a little bit about your background and your current endeavor, which is an absolutely fantastic platform, very much, I would say, performing a very, very important and meaningful public service. And just a little bit about how you got to this point, and then I'd love to dive into some of the very important subjects that I know people care about.
Sure. So I am a clinical psychologist, and 8 years ago, I started a program called Wholeview Wellness, which is located in Midtown Manhattan, and we treat addiction and problem gambling here, both in person and virtually. And we have two different programs. One is a sort of a private practice, and the other is a program that has a state license, the New York State license, and we accept most of the managed Medicaid plans and essential plans. So we try to democratize addiction and problem gambling care.
That's great. And I know you have sort of spent a good part of your professional life addressing the issues of addiction, and this may be the latest iteration. But talk to us a little bit about currently the platform, what you're doing, and the services that you're providing. And I know that there have been a variety of affiliations, both in terms of state, city, federal, and various other organizations that have quickly been attracted to your services and are supporting you.
Yeah, so we have intensive outpatient services, which is sort of like 9 hours or more of treatment a week. And then we have outpatient services, which is anything less than that. And we see people for everything from, people who think maybe my drinking might be a problem, maybe I'm over drinking, or I'm not sure, or I want to talk about my drinking, to people who are, coming out of rehab who've had, seriously disrupted lives because of their alcohol or their substance use or their problem gambling. And we also treat the loved ones of people who are struggling in these ways. So if you have a loved one who's struggling with gambling or struggling with drinking or substance use, we can provide care for those loved ones as well.
Okay, that's terrific. And for people who actually follow sports, there is no shortage of information, I'll call it infomercials, talking about odds and gambling and the payoffs and the bonuses and the various prop bets and things like that. So the market has grown significantly, obviously, since legalization. And maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what you have been seeing along the way. And I think, people, if you've listened to the ads for some of the most popular betting apps and betting platforms and, even the online casinos, at the tail end, there's always a sort of I'll call it compressed quick speech about a 1-800 number if you have a problem with gambling. So, Sarah, maybe you can give us a quick tour of what you've been seeing over the past few years and particularly recently.
Yeah, so since mobile sports betting has become legal, we have seen a real increase in the number of people coming in significant distress because of their problem gambling. And you've got gambling right in your pocket 24/7 now, and it's sort of interesting. We've seen a big rise in young men coming in for treatment. Their families are or spouses are really upset with them because they've gambled a lot of money, and they've lost money that they really couldn't afford to lose. And people become very, very despondent, really depressed, really upset with themselves when they're in these situations. So the level of mental health distress also is really quite significant around these cases. And the family strife is really bad, because if your family members gambled a lot of your money away, you're going to not be happy about it. So we're doing both treatment of the person who's struggling with the gambling, and then also treatment of for the family members as well.
Sarah, how do people generally find you when they have a problem?
So we are listed, through the state. We have the problem gambling certification through the state. So OASIS has a list of, the Office of Alcohol and Substance Abuse Services has a list of providers. So people find us through the Hope line. 1-877-8-HOPE-NY is the line. So people find us through that. They Google us online, and then through friends and family who've been already to see us. We get referrals through our prior patients.
And I saw you reference young men. Talk to us a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of the population of people who are coming in.
Yeah. New York State talks a lot about the population that's most affected by this right now, or most severely affected, I should say, are young Black men 18 to 24. And it's related to all of the commercials and information that's coming towards them during sports events.
When you say the particular population that seems to be most affected, young Black men, is that what you mean in terms of the people who are coming forward to seek help, or the people that New York State believes are being most impacted by the enticements of sports gambling?
So I think that's who's most coming forward for help. Those numbers are through a presentation I saw through the New York Center for Council on Problem Gambling, and they were sharing those data that I saw just recently, and they were saying that was the population that they were seeing most affected by problem gambling.
So let's, if we can we unpack sort of the problem, and I want to get into how you begin to deal with these addictions and the type of care and support that's needed. But what is actually bringing people in? How does this process of addiction actually occur?
When we see people, it's usually because their family is upset with them because they've lost so much money. It's rarely that they're coming in on their own. They're usually forced in by a spouse or a parent or a loved one. And it's usually that because they often are still in the cycle of thinking they can win it back or they can chase that loss. And They've often, borrowed money from family, taken money from family even. They've gotten to a place where, or there could have been some legal involvement. I have one patient I'm working with now who, the police came to his home because he had such large debts and he wasn't paying his debts. So it's usually some kind of external situation that's come up upon them that forces them into treatment.
And I know from our conversations that we've had, I don't want to say that there is a one specific pattern of what brings people to the point of being addicted to gambling, but there are certain themes here. And I noted, which I think is a very important point, that today people walk around and often have by their bedside access to these gambling platforms because it's all on the phone. And so maybe you can talk to us a little bit about sort of how someone begins to get addicted, the types of things you've seen, the stories, etc., in terms of, the popular narratives that are shared with you in the treatment of people.
Yeah. So I think it often just starts with once in a while doing some sports betting, and then, it can really progress, and around the time of the Super Bowl or March Madness, when, I think a lot of people feel like everyone's doing it. There's a lot of social pressure to do it. People have it may start out with more team loyalty, but then it can move into something where, like you said, because they have the phone all the time, they can start betting on things all around the clock. I have a patient who moved to betting on tennis because tennis happens all year round, and he wanted to be able to bet all year round. And so, if you start to see something like, lying about their betting, sort of chasing losses, hiding the activity, wanting to cut back but not being able to cut back, that's when you start to worry. And then people get into sort of financial crises or, significant debt, borrowing money, maybe taking money, which can lead to a lot of relationship conflict. And then, I had a patient who was getting up in the middle of the night to place bets, so he wasn't getting enough sleep, or even doing bets while they were in the shower, like leaning out of the shower to place bets, they really just can't stop.
So again, some of the things you're touching upon it's familiar behavior, whether it's with alcohol or drugs or sex for that matter, but this all of a sudden inability to control impulses, it becomes your preoccupation. Oftentimes it's there's stigma, there's shame in losing or being addicted, and so the hiding from people, the theft of money, the borrowing of money, all these things are common themes that I know you've dealt with in the course of your career in treating addictions. But what I'd like to dive into, and our producer here, David, he and I have been speaking about this, but I don't know if you're familiar with the quote from Hemingway's "The Sun Also Rises," and in essence, there's a dialogue between I think it's with the character of Mike Campbell. His answer to the question is two ways: gradually, then suddenly. And so the thing I'd like to see if we can get you to share with the audience are sort of what is going on with these apps that induces people, keeps them engaged on a regular basis, convinces people that they can actually win at this and stay ahead. And some people do, arguably. But between the constant advertisements, the fact that the commentators are talking about this all the time, even the ordinary commentators on sports channels and online. And, there are messages that get sent out. There are these prop bets, there are the bonus plays, there's the, if something doesn't happen, you can get back half your bet and all sorts of things. But it's not just the fact that they have access to this, but there is a constancy, at least as I've seen, around the messaging and around the psychological insights that I think are built into these platforms in terms of how to keep people engaged and how to sort of trigger continuous involvement. And so maybe you can share your perspectives on that as well.
Yeah, so there's sort of like the cognitive distortions that people have, where they think, I'm really good at sports, so I have an edge on others, so they have these kind of like an illusion of control where they overestimate their influence over the betting. So they think they have extra skill or, that kind of thing. Oftentimes people have kind of a selective memory where they remember their wins, but they really don't remember their losses. And people also have sort of these magical thinking, I've got my lucky jersey on, or I've got my rabbit foot, or I'm playing on a certain machine, or, those kinds of magical thinking or superstitious thoughts. So there's a lot of things that are happening just within the person. And then the companies, they give people bonuses and free bets and free spins. And, they sort of target people, like when they've had a lot of losses, they might give them, like a comps so they can get started again, and they like reel them back in after they've lost. And there's VIP programs and different kinds of loyalty programs that like give people perks that keep them, betting. There's push notifications that people get. There's so many different things in the apps that are designed to keep people, make it easier for them, reduce the friction, let them, bet with it with one tap, so that they can just keep going. And there's a lot of gamification also in the apps with badges and streaks and, different kinds of things on the leaderboards that are rewarding to people that just keep them going.
And you'd referenced sort of young men in general, and I do want to go back to whether certain groups are being either targeted more or more potentially susceptible. But we've talked about this in the context of young people and who are playing this. And I assume, Sarah, that it's not just a matter that young people are a little more comfortable with technology, but there is something about young people and the development of the brain that makes them more likely to engage in this activity and makes them more susceptible to inducements into this activity. And I'll tie this in. We had a chance to briefly discuss, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, there was an article published in Nature magazine about a new research that was conducted that actually outlined what we didn't know previously about the brain and its development and the different stages. And one of the conclusions was, basically that adolescence can extend well into the early 30s of people. So what are the implications of the age demographics, the development of the brain, how people assess risk, understand their own activities, impulse control, all the things that, sort of get boiled into the pot of addiction?
Yeah, so young people's brains are sort of wired for reward seeking, so they have like less mature control systems. So they're more likely to be drawn in to all of the sort of things that are happening in these gaming systems. They really are more likely to take a risky bet. And like you said, like that, that the 18 to 24, 34, population are going to be more susceptible to all of the things that are happening in these apps. They're more impulsive, they're more sensation seeking. So gambling is, sort of goes right along with that.
as you see people and treat people, they come in, I can't help but sort of think about the parallels to substance use disorders in that very often it's the family members who have to sort of try to get control of the patient or the client, help to drive them into treatment, help to acknowledge the problem. Their families are often victimized in terms of, the loss of possessions and obviously the loss of a relationship. So as people come in, either on their own or through their families, maybe you can walk us through the process of how you begin to get your arms around the issue of gambling addiction.
Yeah, so I mean, it's very similar to treating other addiction. We spend a couple of hours with the patient going through their whole history, so and often there's concomitant drinking or other cannabis or other use going on with along with the problem gambling. They often come together, and so we go through a history of all of that to try to figure out. And it's there's so much shame and so much stigma along with it. People don't want to admit how much they've lost, so it's really hard for people to be totally honest and upfront. So getting to a place of sort of radical honesty is really important. And a big part of treatment for problem gambling is going through their whole financial situation and talking about, who do they owe money to? How much money do they owe? What is their financial situation really? And that's hard to get to because people, often don't want to look at it, don't want to think about it. They feel really embarrassed or ashamed. But one of the biggest triggers to continued gambling is having financial pressure, because people think, oh, well, I'll gamble and I'll win back the money, and so getting a hold of their finances is really, really important as part of the initial evaluation, and then also finding out how has it hurt their relationships, because it causes a lot of distress. The family members feel frightened, that their loved one doesn't have control, that they're gonna gamble away their money, that the family is going to be in financial distress, and even once they've gotten control of it, often the family members continue to be sort of traumatized by it, and so they're constantly worried that it's going to happen again, and it's really hard for them to trust. So working on that with them is a big part of the treatment.
I can just imagine, hopefully we'll call it radical transparency, honesty about how much they've lost, honesty about how long they've been doing this. Difficult in terms of trying to understand, how much they owe to people, what they may have stolen to support the habit and things like that. But Sarah, you get people to that point and they're coming in for sessions. I'm going to go back again. The parallels with substance use disorders keep striking me because of the, as you say, stigma and shame and having to come to grips with everything that you're doing and how long it's been going on. But then the session is over with you, and they still have that phone, and that phone is communicating with them. What are some of the, steps, assuming that, you're making some progress, you don't want to have, 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. The issues around the type of support that they need, the types of steps they have to take for themselves, the types of steps that they need to take alongside others, that type of thing. Can you sort of walk us through, I'll call it the most multifaceted nature of the disease and the treatment required?
Yeah. So one thing that's different about mobile sports betting, which is different from other addictions, is that, when someone's drinking or using drugs, family members know it's like they can look at them and they can know, they can smell it, they can see it.
But Sarah, I'm going to push back. I have to on this one. I can't tell you how many parents had no idea, right? Had no idea with their loved ones, their kids,
We're struggling with drug use.
Yeah, with drug use. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely people who can hide it, but like typically, but by the time it gets bad, family members
yes,
can
yeah,
tell.
I get it. They're disappearing, but still, there's denial. They want to believe their loved
Yeah.
ones. I didn't mean to interrupt your train of thought. I just, I like to say, I don't know enough to be an expert, but I know enough to be, dangerous. But I cannot tell you how often people are shocked. They had no idea that someone was addicted and abusing, and I'm working with a client right now who has hidden it from employers and his spouse, but has had a very serious problem for years. So, but
Yeah,
go ahead.
that's
I didn't
really
mean to
true.
interrupt. Yeah.
But the mobile sports betting is so much easier to hide, I guess is what I would say. It feels like it's a different, it's much easier to hide than substance use, I think. That's what the family members tell me, is that they're much more anxious about it because they feel like they're not going to know if there's a return to gambling. So that's just one thing that I've noticed. But there's definitely people who can hide their alcohol use, I'm sure, or their drug use. But the one thing that we can do, and I really encourage people to do right away if they're doing a lot of mobile sports betting or going to casinos, is to do the self-exclusion program. So there's some paperwork forms that people can fill out, and they have to be notarized, and they're sent in. And once they've filled this out, they're excluded from online betting in the state that they fill out those forms. So if they do the self-exclusion forms, they can't go on FanDuel or one of these sites to bet because they're excluded from them, and they can't go into casinos and engage in gambling there because they've been excluded. So that's one thing that makes it harder for people, and it reduces the ability to gamble. People can find other ways and illegal ways to gamble, but it definitely makes it harder.
So I'm glad you raised that, and I'm trying to lead the witness a little bit, but I would think that not that precludes someone from, downloading again, but I would think one of the first things would be, let's take these apps off your phone, okay? And I'm familiar with the sort of self-exclusionary form. I have been told, but you would know better than I, that people have found it somewhat complex, and maybe it's trying to find a notary these days, but to file those forms, to basically exclude oneself from the gambling websites, the apps, and the casinos in the state. So how difficult actually is that, and do people actually know that option is available?
Yeah, I think people may not know, which is why it's good to talk about it and to bring it out. But finding a notary, you have to go to a bank or know a notary, or so there is a little bit of an issue with that. The New York Council on Problem Gambling helps with that. They can help you get the forms filled out, and we do it with our patients here at Wholeview. There's a little work to it, but you can definitely get it done. So I guess it's a mixed picture.
Okay, and I was just going to say I'm going to draw from some of the Nobel Prize winning behavioral economists and psychologists who and leading academics who talk about human decision making and what it takes to nudge people in a particular. To take that's Professor Sunstein's book, but to get people to do certain things, and how do you make it easy? Do you opt in? Do you opt out? But it is amazing, if I can just editorialize, how easy it is to get involved with these platforms, but it's a lot tougher to get out of them and to make sure that you're being excluded.
That's true.
And there just seems to be something recalibrated. And again, I'm not moralizing. I don't want this to be heard as someone who's against this or free choice or, recreational gambling. But it's really about the fact that there are consequences, and there's some people here who can do it responsibly, to use their term, and there are people who can't, and there are people who start responsibly, but they fall down, and just having a safety net, because as you've indicated, this can be extraordinarily impactful on a family, financially, emotionally, reputationally, etc. So All right. I did want to query you a little bit on the notarized form and how that gets disseminated and such. But it seems to me it should be made as easy for people to be excluded as it is for them to be included. I guess that's really the point. So, all right. So, you encourage them to do that, and talk to us about, I'll call it the chronic nature of this, and the type of ongoing work that one has to do, and the kind of support that people need to, basically begin to heal and cure themselves of this dependency.
Yeah, so the core work that we do with people is a cognitive behavioral therapy program, and it's really helping them challenge distorted thoughts. And there are so many types of distorted thoughts that people have around their gambling, and it takes time to sort of rewire the brain and to help them, understand that their thinking has changed as a result of their of their betting and their gambling. So it's just like other types of addiction where we have to really think through what are the triggers, what are the things that make them want to place a bet or to gamble, and then what keeps them gambling, and then what to do if they've started and how to stop and get a little help, and also how to think through what happened if they do have a return to gambling. And it's the same thing we do with alcohol or any substance use, where we're working on this all the time. And if people have slips and they download the app or they go back to it, and sort of talking through what happened, maybe they were really stressed, or maybe they, like a bill came in and they get really anxious about paying the bill, but working on those things over time with them, like as they're living their life, and helping them get back on track if they've had a recurrence, is the work that we do with every addiction, because it's their chronic disorders that, there's no cure. So it's a process over time to help them work through it. And we do encourage people to engage in like Gambling Anonymous, to go and get peer support over time too, and have a community of people that understand what they've been through, and to get support from others who've sort of conquered it can be really, really helpful as well.
And so what I'm hearing is that this is a chronic problem, no different than maybe heart disease, cancer, etc., that this is with people, and they have to work the problem, and they have to have support. And I'm hearing the importance of removing the stigma or the shame. Getting with people who have been through this is important in the ongoing support, but that this is not a question of just let's put a Band-Aid on it and you're done. And maybe and there may be co-occurring issues that somebody is going through that's driving this behavior.
That's definitely true. Like looking at the, anxiety or depression and treating those as well is really, really important.
So the gambling addiction is a symptom of a broader issue or broader disease, as opposed to the disease itself. And understanding that this is, an ongoing issue that people really have to continue to work on, and hopefully to be able to do it without shame. And one thing that, having been at Goldman and being very familiar with the financial industry for a long time, there are people, this is pre the gambling apps, but there's still plenty of gambling going on, and there are bookies. There's still bookies out there, Sarah, who will take the action. But when people fall behind, they often do desperate things, and they do things that can affect not only their families but their jobs. So being mindful of the very real risks that can happen. I'm sure you've heard plenty of stories of people hitting the bottom and some of the desperate things that they had to do to cover their losses or hide their addiction. So again, this is all part of the pathology of this particular addiction. So let me, can I pivot a little bit, because I've read enough and I really want to get your views, but there was a lot of experts and commentators have spoken about the consequences of the pandemic, people being, basically housebound, et cetera, and otherwise isolated, bored. They've been bored and, isolated, removed from their friends, removed from their job, not going in. But people saw a lot of behavior that seemed to take off during the pandemic, including increased gambling. And I'm just curious whether that is something that you witnessed, whether you're seeing the residual effects of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we saw an increase in many different addictions during COVID. I can think of one patient who was sort of cooped up with a family and ended up getting addicted to scratch-offs. And the only time he got to leave the house during COVID was to go to the gas station and get scratch-offs. And he ended up, racking up $100,000 of debt in scratch-offs.
By the way, just so everyone understands, you're talking about the scratch-off lottery tickets
yes.
that are sold. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, some people drank too much, during COVID, and some people gambled. So the online sports betting is something you can do from your home, right? So you don't have to leave, you don't have to go somewhere. So I think, it sort of relieved boredom, it relieved anxiety for some people. So there was an increase during that time as well.
And a number of very, very smart behavioral experts and commentators, and you touched upon this, are we dealing with a generational issue here? And maybe because it's technology and some people are more comfortable, but what's impacting young people, and I have read that if you think about the position that many young people are in light of the current job industry, the career tracks, the concerns about AI and the loss of employment or disruption to their careers, or the fact that people have not been able to do things that prior generations have been able to do, such as expand their relationships into marriage and families, in terms of buying a home, etc., that there is a certain amount of risks that the younger people seem to be willing to take on because they feel that they have to, Sarah, okay? And that these are calculable and worthwhile risks. And if they don't do it now, swing for the fences, so to speak. And whether it's investing in, I'll call it alternative assets, whether, we're talking about crypto or, other things, or wagering on predictive platforms, whether it's sports or these new predictive markets, they feel they have to in order to advance their station in life and really to actually have the capital to build a what I'll refer to as a long-standing, sustainable way to support themselves. I'm just curious whether you have any perspective on that.
Yeah, I do. We do see some of that, and that's where we see more like day trading and sort of the cryptocurrency, which is sort of a blurry line between investing and gambling, I think. And we see people who have this idea that they're going to make it big quick, get rich quick kind of thing. And they think that they're going to figure out a strategy for crypto and currency investing or day trading that's going to get them, and then they end up in significant debt.
And so, and I'm glad you touched upon it, but I want to sort of close with some questions that, first of all, the day trading type of thing, the trading on meme stocks, as they refer to them, which has nothing to do with financial valuation, but you're trying to capture the alpha of momentum behind a particular idea or company, but we now have these prediction platforms. The prediction platforms are getting into sports betting, and the sports betting platforms are getting into the prediction markets, where you can make a bet on virtually anything. can be a political outcome, the appointment of the new chair of the Federal Reserve, somewhat famously an invasion of Venezuela, which got a lot of headlines, et cetera. And just what are you seeing in terms of what I refer to patient behavior and the types of patients and the types of issues that are coming into your organization?
It's interesting. I am not seeing the people coming into care for prediction market issues yet, but I think it's because people don't even know that care is available, that there's help for that. So I think it's really good that we're talking about it and getting the word out so that people know that this is also part of problem gambling or, problematic gambling. Because we're just not seeing it yet. As stigmatized as problem gambling and sports betting is, I think like sort of these prediction markets, it might be even more stigmatized. So they may not even be talking about that piece of it.
Well, I'd like to actually let me float an idea to you, which is a big part of the prediction markets, their thesis for purposes of regulatory oversight, no less sharing revenue with the state, okay, in terms of the action, is that we are not a gambling platform, okay? We're a predictions market, and therefore I don't have to worry about 1-800-GAMBLERS in the tagline that, goes this, or do I have to, as part of my disclaimer or advertisement, talk about where to go to get help, or do I have to monitor for what might be highly risky transactions where people are losing a lot of money and getting in over their head? So
yeah. And so people, and I think as an extension of that, people may not realize if that's where they're struggling, they may not know they can get help for it because it's not being advertised that way.
So, Sarah, this has been very helpful, part of a continued conversation. I feel like we should speak after the Super Bowl, but immediately before March Madness. We are watching, together with my producer here, David, we are really very fascinated with the activity in the prediction markets. And as you may know, a number of the online brokerage businesses are now have strategic partnerships with prediction platforms. So they're capturing what people are interested in, and if you're trading one thing, you may want to make a bet on something related to the markets or something politically, geopolitically, etc. So we're seeing, I'll call it the convergence of these industries. The no less a important entity, the New York Stock Exchange, has made a significant, I think it was $1 billion investment in one of the prediction platforms. So you can see that convergence. So would like to continue the conversation with you, but let me maybe give you the floor. But if people are having a problem, or if people they have a friend, family, relative, etc., who's having a problem, how do people actually find you, Sarah?
So we are online. It's WholeView, like Whole Foods, but WholeView. And people can just Google us and call us, but people can also just call the Hope line, which is 877-8-HOPE-NY, and they can get resources that are near them. And then the New York State Problem Gambling Resource Centers are super helpful. They can help people find help as well. And Gambling Anonymous is free, and you can go online or you can go in person. It's a great way to get started. If you're looking for help, that's another way to get started.
Great. And can I give you a bit of a shout out? But you have a terrific team of clinicians and psychologists and experts, people who are very familiar with the nature of these conditions and how people end up finding themselves addicted, dependent, etc. And you do, Sarah, I'm going to be somewhat rhetorical, but you do operate WholeView without any stigma or shame being imposed upon people who come in.
Yeah, if if someone's hearing this and struggling with gambling, call us. We will help. The treatment actually really helps. And so there is a lot of hope. And I think that people get so down on themselves that they think there's no way to change, but there really is.
And Sarah, so thank you very much for your service to the public, and it's been an interesting your career. I mean, the fact that you were one of the first people, first organizations to recognize that this was a increasing problem issue. So the safety net, and kudos to New York State for providing a great deal of support behind your organization and others as well. So thank you again, and the conversation to be continued.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me, and thanks for raising awareness.
Okay, well, and raising some hope for people. Okay, I thought that last point is very important, that there are tried and tested methods that do work here.
Definitely. There's a lot of hope.
Great. Thanks again, Sarah.
Thanks for listening. Want more RANE content? Subscribe to the Decision Advantage podcast by RANE Network wherever you get your podcasts, or visit our website at ranenetwork.com. That's RANE network.com.